Maybe the worst part, though, was his laughter as he contorted himself to where his torso was now outstretched into the room with me, and his arms were wildly waving in my direction. Hello, and welcome to all Dente Creepypasta, horror stories cooked to perfection with a splash of red sauce. My name is CZ, and I will be your server this episode. Today's episode is a sequel to Creepy Clown School Lockdown, which you can click or tap right here to listen to if you wish, but you don't necessarily have to watch them in order. This time we're moving up to high school. I know many of you don't look back at your high school years too fondly, but I think today's offering will make you appreciate your experience a little bit more. Let's dig right in. Fourth period algebra was the most dreaded part of my day. Not only do I hate math, but it's the last morning class before lunch. The schedule gets a little easier once I hit that afternoon hump, but that hump is a big one. I've never been good with math, and having Miss Nelson, or as we call her, the Crypt Keeper, was not making things easier this semester. In fact, the only thing keeping me afloat in that class was the fact that my friend Chris was texting me the answers from second period. It was a muggy afternoon towards the end of the school year. As usual, Mrs. Nelson refused to turn on the air conditioning. It was somehow fitting to be broiling through my fourth period hell. We started the Thursday exam, and the Crypt Keeper plopped behind her desk in the front corner of the room. Cheating my way through this would be easier than I thought. I placed down a water bottle and slyly slid my phone across the desk into the bottle's shadow. Piece of cake. I opened my text conversation with Chris and began to transfer the information onto the page. A, B, A, 24.3 repeating. I had to mix in a couple wrong answers as well, just to make it believable. Just then, I hear the unmistakable sound. Someone getting up from a chair. My eyes dart up and see the old pile of bones rising to her feet. Crap. I wondered if she suspected something. She began to pace towards my desk. Just my luck. I guess I'd have to act like I was actually trying to solve the equations until she sat back down. It was like reading another language. I had no idea what I was doing. That's when I noticed my phone buzz. I should have turned off the vibration before the test. I don't think it gave me away though. Could have been anyone's phone from anyone's pocket. But there was bad news. The vibration started sliding my phone down the small incline of the desk. It slowly slid away from the safe cover of the water bottle. I glanced up to the teacher. Her eyes were locked onto me. The phone continued to slide down. All I could do was hope that it stopped or that she turned away long enough for me to slip the phone in my pocket. No such luck. It fell off the desk and onto the floor. Trying to play it off like it had fallen out of my pocket, I reached down to grab the phone. But a cold, bony hand grasped my wrist before I could. Office. Now. Those were the only words that came out of her mouth. At least it was air-conditioned in the area outside the dean's office, where I sat to await my sentencing. The dean's office was a smaller room within the confines of the main office, which basically connects all the offices of the administration, who were supposedly all out at lunch, so I'd have to wait for the dean to return before I would find out how long I'd be spending in detention. You can imagine my surprise when a fully costumed circus clown dragging a big hammer walked into the room with me. That seemed odd. I hadn't heard of any assemblies or anything going on this week. I'm not exactly sure when I had the realization that something foul was up with this clown. It wasn't when he grabbed a chair and shoved it under the main door of the office to jam it shut. I just saw that as more of a gag to get me to crack a smile for some reason. I guess when it started to get uncomfortable was when he dragged his hammer across the desks in the middle of the office, knocking over a bunch of stuff and making a mess, all while locking eye contact with me and giggling maniacally. Still, I just had no reason to get too freaked out any further than a little bit of nervous laughter. I mean, for all I knew, the school's admin could have just been pranking each other. No, I don't think it was until I saw the clown starting to talk to himself when the panic started to set in.
Step right up and test your might.
Then he swung the hammer in the air, high over his head, and freaking smashed it down on the doorknob to the principal's office. The door was basically destroyed and swung right open. Then the clown looked at me, dead in the eyes, and said,
Looks like we have a winner.
Then he trudged into the principal's office. I was frozen in fear at this point, not sure if I should run for it and find someone or if I was on a hidden camera show or what the hell was going on. Meanwhile, the clown was rummaging around in the principal's office when I heard a loud crack come from the school's intercom system, followed by the sound of analog feedback. It went on for a few seconds before being replaced by circus music, but it sounded creepy and messed up. I think he'd blown out a speaker on the intercom. I also felt the air conditioner come to a halt, and if I wasn't mistaken, it had been replaced with heat. The clown side shuffled out of the principal's office with the hammer slung over his shoulder and the most evil-looking sinister grin. What was shocking about his appearance was how wide his smile spread. It looked like his grin nearly stretched from ear to ear, and I mean that literally. That and the glowing look in his eyes told me that I needed to bolt right now. I sprang out of my chair just as the clown screeched and charged at me. I slipped into the dean's office before he could get to me, slammed the door, and locked it. I knew that wouldn't cover me for long though, so I immediately went to the desk and tried to push it in front of the door. It was much heavier than it looked. I couldn't get the thing to budge. The bookshelf would have to do for now, but I knew I was only biding my time. I felt the crash of the hammer's impact attack the door as I positioned the bookshelf. It not only knocked the doorknob off, but smashed the wood in that area all around the doorknob, letting in a beam of light through the outside. That light soon became blotted out by the clown's huge yellow smile, staring at me through the hole. He began to cackle. I didn't know how long I had. I instinctively reached for my phone to try to call for help, but I felt my heart plunge as I realized that it had been confiscated by Mrs. Nelson. I looked around the tiny office. There was a phone on the desk, a landline. I picked it up, punched 911, but as soon as I brought it to my ear, all I got was signal. The line had somehow been disconnected. With no window in the room, I had no means of escape. And with the main office door barricaded, I was trapped in here with this maniac. Then I realized he was no longer staring through the hole. He was going to try to ram it in again. I felt my eyes well up with tears as I started to realize all the possibilities of what he might do to me. With one last-ditch effort, I grunted and pushed the dean's desk as hard as I could and managed to tip it over, sending it slamming to the ground. The picture of the dean's daughter shattered on the floor, but there was no time to worry about the repercussions of that now. The door was starting to open, and I was able to drive the desk just far enough to stop the clown from getting in. I struggled to push the desk a few moments more, and it seemed like we were at a stalemate. Then it seemed like he had stopped pushing, and the sound of the circus music abruptly stopped. And as far as I could tell, the clown had given up. Then, out of nowhere, through the partially open and partially busted door, the clown lodged himself into the opening and tried to squeeze himself through. I screamed when I saw the circus makeup melting off his face like some kind of nightmarish monk painting. His once round, puffy red wig was now drenched in sweat and stuck to his face in a series of dark, red strands. Maybe the worst part, though, was his laughter as he contorted himself to where his torso was now outstretched into the room with me, and his arms were wildly waving in my direction. Instinctively, I jumped back, which was a bad idea because he was then able to retract back to the other side of what was left of the door and slowly but surely force it open in my direction. At this point, he'd surely get in. All I could do was prepare myself to fight a battle I knew I could not win. Then, out of nowhere, his progress just stopped. This time I didn't let down my guard. I stood on high alert when I noticed some banging around in the background. Someone was trying to get into the office. Suddenly, I could see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I hoped that I might be saved. The main office door was kicked down, and the voice of the school police officer yelled out, "Freeze! Get your hands in the air!" I have to admit, it didn't sound very convincing, given that I could hear the tremble in his voice. But I was at least somewhat comforted knowing that he'd be armed. I called out for help and the officer rushed to my aid. The strange part was, the clown was nowhere to be found. I explained that he had smashed the door in moments before, but in searching the entire office, we couldn't figure out how he had gotten away. In fact, there were only 2 pieces of evidence that ended up being found. One was a rubber clown nose left clamped to the microphone in the principal's office that was hooked up to the school's PA system. The other was a knot of red hair from the clown's wig. I would later find out that they ran tests on it and discovered that it was real human hair. It belonged to this guy Bronson, who was currently in prison serving a 15-year sentence. There was no way he could have escaped, so the appearance of his DNA only added to the mystery. I wish I could say it ended there, with me getting out of my punishment on account of the traumatic experience. But there was one more haunting thing that happened. While it was true that I didn't have to serve my detention, I think it's safe to say that I learned my lesson, and I was never going to cheat on another test again, or do anything that might get my phone confiscated for that matter. I was able to scratch by and pass math with a D. My parents weren't happy about it, but again, I got a little sympathy after having nearly become the jester's afternoon snack or whatever. So summer came and I was free for a couple more months. Chris and I were skateboarding on the street towards 7-Eleven, and I heard a strange sound and stopped. "What's wrong?" Chris asked me. I held up an index finger. I listened for a moment, and I was sure I could make out the sound of the same circus music from that day in the office. I looked up to find the car it was coming from, a beat-up red Bug with no license plate. My eyes met the driver's. It was the very same clown from before, again with the makeup melted down his face onto his collar in a most disturbing manner. He rolled up the window. Thanks for listening to all Dente Creepypasta. Your total today is $24.33, but if you like this video right now, I'll waive that fee and give you everything you just listened to absolutely free. This episode's score was done by the talented OST maker, and the end theme you're hearing now is Naoya Sakamoto's rendition of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Head into the comments and let me know of any other stories you'd like to see get a sequel. Every like and comment helps out the channel, but if you want to float too, you'll have to pick up one of these shirts from the merch store. Remember to subscribe to CZsWorld for new horrors every week, ring that death bell till it says all notifications, and I'll see you in the next one, assuming we both survive.